Ironically, episode 2 actually begins between the four walls of a prison. Jarmeka Yvonne Nikki Whitehead was born on April 18, 1975, while her mother, Linda, was incarcerated for drug possession. Upon her arrival to the world, she was immediately adopted by her grandmother, Della Frazier, who explained on numerous accounts that Nikki was difficult to care for. She would often be found around older men outside of her school. At the age of 17, Nikki became pregnant with twin girls. The girls, Tasmiyah and Jasmiyah, aka Taz and Jazz, were born on November 27, 1993. Nikki, feeling understandably incapable of caring for the twins at her age, gave up custody of them to her grandmother Della, which gave her house a grand total of four, three of which were still children. This dynamic would remain for the next 12 years. Hey guys, I'm back. It's another week, and we're back with another episode. Like I said, like I told you. So, it has been reported a number of times that although Nikki spent most of her time partying and drinking, living the life, that her grandmother did all that she could possibly do to create a safe, stable environment for her and her children. My grandma, she would have hit the road, Jack. And if you notice that I have yet to mention the father of the twins, it is because, surprise, surprise, I found minimal information on this man. Either he didn't want to be known, Nikki didn't want him to be known, whatever the reason was. The fact is that he was 100% absent from their lives. And if you really, really, really want to get into it, but I'm going to leave it alone because this show isn't even about that. So he wasn't there. Let's just get back to the story. Although Great Grandma Della was only one person, she was more than capable of caring for Nikki and the twins and made sure that they were raised in a nourishing, positive way, despite their mother being in and out of the house. During the 12 years that Taz and Jazz were under the stability of their great-grandmother, they excelled academically and socially. The girls were on honor roll and also enjoyed extracurricular activities such as tennis, music, and ballet. In 2000, Nikki met a truck driver named Robert and moved herself and her daughters in with him, but was still very sporadic in their lives and ultimately spent most of their time at Great-Grandma Della's anyway. In 2007, Nikki requested back custody of her 13-year-old daughters with the promise of a better life and was met almost immediately with resentment from the girls. Living with their mother permanently and living under her rules after being raised practically completely by their great-grandmother, they found it very hypocritical of Nikki to demand any kind of respect from them. On the other hand, Nikki, who had reportedly spent most of her still young life out in the streets and living an unstable lifestyle, felt that she had finally gotten every other aspect of her life together and wanted to show her girls, her mother, and herself that she could be a great mother too. Unfortunately, the harder Nikki pushed, the more the twins resisted. Okay. So let's take a second to break this down. We got Great Grandma Della, who's taking care of a 17-year-old who's never home, and that 17-year-old's twin daughters. And you got Mr. Robert. So for some reason, Mr. Robert was the one that stuck enough to stay. He was that one. I don't know if it was his money. I couldn't find out if it was his personality or what exactly it was about him that Nikki adored so much enough to stay with him. But for whatever reason, Nikki felt comfortable enough with this man to move herself and her twin daughters in with him, who is, by the way, 30 years her senior. So you could probably at this point kind of tell where the twins are coming from. Like you can kind of see their angle. These girls were honor roll students while they were staying with their grandmother. They were in the Girl Scouts. The Girl Scouts. Just let them continue to be great, But Mama Nikki, she had a point to prove. She wanted those kids with her under her roof or her man's roof or You know, and she got exactly what she wanted. And then she didn't. And then she did again. Okay, let's just keep watching. Moving to Conyers, Georgia with Nikki and 55-year-old Robert was a difficult adjustment for the girls. Although Nikki tried her best to continue to direct her twin daughters in the right path, resentment quickly turned into arguments and physical altercations that resulted in police interventions, mandatory counseling, juvenile court appearances, and ultimately the girls being returned back to their grandmother. The girls definitely didn't appreciate it, and Nikki could tell. On June 28, 2008, authorities were called to Nikki's home in response to a physical attack. Upon arrival, police found Nikki hysterical and riddled in scratches. The girls, on the other hand, were calm, with no marks on their body. The officers that arrived at the scene after the call couldn't tell that anything had happened at all by looking at the girls. Eventually, Jazz and Taz were returned back to their grandmother, only to be forced back into the care of their mother on January 5th, 2010, after going back to court for running away. At this point, a judge declared the girls as ungovernable and ordered the girls to live with their mother for a 2-week period. 1 week later, Nikki was found dead. So Nikki was a smart woman, okay? And she knew when something was up with her girls. Whether they liked her or not, she could always tell. She knew they were kind of working together or teaming together to band against her in some sort of way, shape, or form. She may have even been a bit fearful, which is completely understandable to me when you can actually feel people in your home plotting against you. I don't know. Like, that makes sense. During their very last court hearing to go back to Nikki, Jasmiyah told Nikki to her face in the courtroom that she would kill her. No joke. So again, we have another couple of organized killers here. This series is chock full of them. So back on my introduction episode, we learned that organized killers, 1, do not commit crimes randomly. Check. 2, tend to be intelligent. Check. Right now, we just have 2 boxes, but Jazz and Taz are about to fill all of them up. Let's just keep it moving. On January 13th, 2010, 16-year-old Jasmiyah and Tasmiyah Whitehead walked into their home after school to find their mother, Nikki, dead in a blood-soaked bathtub. Nikki had been stabbed 80 times with a kitchen knife, her spinal cord nearly severed. Police arrived and immediately began to counsel the girls, who told officers that Nikki had 2 boyfriends that had recently found out about each other. As officers are getting the girls into an ambulance for medical care, they notice one of the twins bite her arm. The reason given was that she does that when she's upset. This short but meaningful action was taken as a red flag to police, but they kept it to themselves until they were able to get the girls in an interrogation room. While being questioned, the girls were very close, pretending to cry and hugging and holding each other. As a courtesy, investigators asked them what could be done to make them feel better. Their one request? To watch CSI. Come on now. When asked how they felt about their mother, their responses were filled with insults. The girls still had on gloves and told investigators a bunch of lies while being questioned. For instance, the girls said that on the morning of their mother's murder, they missed the bus for school, so they walked. Surveillance from a nearby gas station shows that in reality, the girls actually caught a ride to school from a complete stranger that morning. Meanwhile, while the girls were being investigated, cops were back at the crime scene at Nikki's home. They were able to find a pair of bloody boots in a shoebox and a large clump of hair. With the untested bloody boots and hair being the only circumstantial pieces of evidence at the time, cops had no choice but to release the girls back to their grandmother. And although they thought they were free to live normal lives for the next 3 months, they were constantly watched by police who were still building evidence for the case. So during this calm before the storm moment, Robert was able to clear his name with DNA testing. He couldn't show up for anything else, but he showed up for a DNA test. So at least you know he didn't do it, right? But with that being said, the motive that Nikki had multiple boyfriends and that they found out about each other was completely disproven by Robert as well. So as if all signs didn't point to Jazz and Taz before, they definitely did now. That nervous bite from Taz in the ambulance, it actually turned out to be her attempt at hiding her mother's bite on her arm during their last moments. Dental examinations from Nikki's teeth revealed that the bite mark on Taz did come from Nikki originally. Autopsy results also identified human hair in Nikki's teeth. So we do have to give it up to DNA testing at some point in time. Although these are twins, so it's kind of hard to tell who did what because they both have the same DNA. But again, they both had enough to do with it to both be blamed for their mother's murder. Let's continue. On the twins' last day of school, authorities arrested them separately. Taz at her home and Jazz at her school. Although they were quiet at first, they eventually began to talk. Their formal admission was telling. Even though at this point a confession wasn't really necessary, it was still very important. While awaiting trial, Jazz admitted to stabbing Nikki and Taz admitted to restraining her so that her sister could carry out the act. The girls were up until 2 a.m. that morning and didn't appreciate their mother waking them up for school just a few hours later. After murdering Nikki, the girls attempted to clean the entire crime scene and go to school for an alibi. A journal was found at their home that included premeditated details on how they would carry out the murder and how if they didn't do something soon, they would never be able to. A bloody path from their home to the neighbors shows evidence that Nikki got away at some point, but upon investigation of the resident, it was revealed that Nikki had knocked and rang the neighbor's doorbell, but they were in bed so they didn't get up. The blood trail shows that Nikki was eventually drugged back into her home, where she was stabbed in a bathtub. The twins were charged with felony murder and aggravated assault in their mother's death, and they were sentenced to 30 years in prison. When they get out, they will be in their 40s. So this case was very, very difficult for me to discuss for a number of reasons. The nature of it, the circumstances were just all bad from all angles. But not all parties in all cases deserve a bad light. The fact that these girls were so young, they had issues with their mother. She wasn't there as much as she should have been. They all needed counseling. The girls were rude and disrespectful. The boyfriend was in Timbuktu. The girls only got 30 years for a very brutal murder. We still don't know the details of that night / that morning. I could hardly find any stock videos with black women, which is crazy. I mean, I can go on and on and on and on and on and on and on. But in all seriousness, I'm not a mother, so I cannot say where the mistakes began or where things started to fall through the cracks, you know? But there is absolutely no justification for taking a life. None. That's my stance. Okay, guys, that's all for this week. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. Be sure to like my video if you like my content. Tap that bell to know when my next video drops. Subscribe to the YouTube, subscribe to the Facebook, subscribe to the Instagram. Keep up with us because we have some really interesting things coming up. Leave your feedback in those comments. Again, I hope you enjoyed tonight. We will be back.